Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another installment of Flyer Gonna Flyer, our weekly show where we go over all things Flyers, good and bad, and sometimes in the middle. Well, more good or bad. But anyway, joining me this week is one of my two gracious co-hosts, Filibuster 10, aka Eric Martino. Eric, how you doing today, buddy?
Real good, Alex. Had hockey practice, my daughter's hockey practice this morning. Got a nice smell of that ice in the morning, and feeling good. Want to talk some hockey now.
That's the best. You wake up, walk into the arena, you get the smell of the ice, you get the smell of just hockey in general, with a little bit of sweat mixed in. Just, I don't know, gives you a little bit of a jolt, like a little smelling salt feeling, right?
Oh yeah, gives you that energy to go.
What position your daughter play?
Well, at this point, they don't really play positions, but she's more of a defenseman.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, you know what? Nothing wrong with a lockdown defenseman in the
Oh
family.
no,
Just segueing in front of the goalie and being the last defense for them. But
exactly.
anyway, let's segue right into this. Had another pretty interesting week for the Flyers. We went as far as the Ottawa game last week, so we're going to be discussing from Buffalo to Chicago. Um, we're recording this on Sunday morning, so we had 4 games, 2-2 week, wins at the beginning and end of the week, and then some losses in the middle. So, Eric, I'm going to let you start with this one. Start right away with that Buffalo game. In my opinion, probably the best game of the week. What did you take from it?
Oh yeah, definitely. Look, it was definitely the Flyers this week's best game. I think they played actually a cohesive game. Like the goaltending was on point, passes were on point, strategy was on point. They played just a complete game. Like like I know it's a bit of a cliche, but when you play 60 minutes, we gotta play 60 minutes. Well, that was a 60-minute game by the Flyers, which this year honestly they haven't done much. Which usually with the second periods that they don't show up, or there was recently I forget which game it was. The third period where they didn't show up. So it was a good game. But look, we have to take into account also. Look, they were playing the Sabres. They were playing the Sabres without Tage Thompson
Mm-hmm.
and with Devin Levi in net. Not Levi's a scrub goalie or anything. He's a good goalie, but we weren't playing Pekka Luukkonen. But still, look, you got to give full credit to the Flyers. They played well. They won. I would say, dominated a good portion of that game. So, I honestly, the Buffalo game, I can't complain.
Honestly, I think that was the best game they played all year, top to bottom, beginning to end. I don't want to say they played a full 60 minutes because they kind of let their foot off the throttle in the second half, the third, but they did enough where they were so ahead they kind of could coast.
Yep.
They control pace of play. This wasn't just one of those games like you got a few rushes and you have to score on a goalie having some rough performance or some defensive lapses. No, this is a game the Flyers controlled pace to pace for 50 out of the 60 minutes. It was not really even that close. Buffalo's honestly lucky it was even 4-0 after 2. This could have been 6 or 7-0. The Flyers had that many opportunities. First period, a little bit of back and forth action before a guy who was really needed a goal, Tyson Forrest, lights the lamp on a power play goal. Anthony Richard once again getting on the board with another assist. He's been a pleasant surprise from the minors. Thank you, Bruins, by the way. Then not much later into that period, Flyers struck again. They just looked like they were a team ready to play right from the get-go. Second period, like I said, it was more, more just controlling the pace, playing your style, doing what's needed to win. They didn't have that second period issues like they usually had. Igor Zamula, of all people, got one off of a weird bounce. I think it was off of a Sabres player's skate. If I remember correctly, it was just a harmless shot from the point. Another Michkov assist, by the way. And then a beautiful 2-on-0 executed by Michkov and Konechny a little bit later on the period off of a turnover. Michkov draws Levi over as far left as possible before he finds Konechny with a little NHL 24 cross crease tap in. Konechny had practically a yawning open net to score on. But one thing that really stood out about me there was Zach Benson trying to get in Michkov's face after, who's a guy I actually like. And then Connecticut said, nah, fuck that. I'm coming over here, buddy. You ain't touching our prodigy. That's not happening today, bud. But good period. Buffalo did kind of make this a little bit closer in the third, especially those last 10 minutes. Closer than the score indicated before Connecticut caught an empty netter to put the game away, 5-2 win. Then Monday, that Avalanche game. I don't want to say I didn't like the Flyers' effort because they did really play tough. Scoreless first period, a lot of back and forth hockey on a team that, you look at, it's like is better than you on paper. But you played with them. And then the second period blues kind of happened again. McCarr. Simply put, you got McCarr. Cale McCarr came in, put up 2 in the second, almost actually 3. He had 1 call back on that goaltender interference call. Flyers are lucky it was 3-0 after 2 instead of 2-0. But in my opinion, right call. Guy was in the crease. I think Kolosov was in net, kind of messed with Kolosov's positioning there. And then Middlestat made it 3-0 in the third, right at the end of a power play. But what I liked about this game, even though the Flyers lost, they showed resiliency. They showed fight. They played to the last minute. They made this game close. Tippett buried one off of a nice snipe. Rare thing I've been able to say this year. And he's not had the best start to the year, that's for sure. And then Tyson Forster again got on the scoreboard, caught his 4th. And then the Flyers continued that high-octane blast. They didn't let the foot off the throttle. They tried everything they could. They just couldn't get that game to overtime. Colorado came away with the win. What's your take on that game?
Well, like you said too, I really liked their effort. They did give full marks. They played well. I don't think there was really, even though they got outscored again in the second period 2-0, which another negative second period. But I can't say they played bad. I can't say. But what that game showed me is basically the Flyers have compete. The Flyers, they don't give up, and that's what I like to see. But the difference in skill level is night and day. You can't compare. They just got beat by a better team, and honestly, that's what we should strive for. But we need to bring in the talents to compete with them. And to be honest, look, maybe I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but the game against Carolina, same thing. I find it was the carbon copies, pretty much almost carbon copies.
Yeah.
Except I think they had a little bit more effort against Colorado.
For sure.
That third period against Anaheim is they nailed it. Not Anaheim,
Carolina. I was going to correct you.
No, that third period they mailed it in. They didn't play in that third period. No. But again, both games, you saw the difference in talent. We have enough talent to keep up in a way, but we just don't have to really challenge them yet. And that's something that either we have to make a trade or we have to get it through the draft one way or another. But we need I love Michkov. Michkov looks like he's gonna be a superstar. He's most probably going to be a superstar. But you can't just have one. You need at least one more, and another high-end player. And look, we got either drafted or traded. But yeah, that's my take on those two games.
Michkov mania is going wild. That's for damn sure. Unfortunately, though, that Carolina game, it was kind of on pause because, as you mentioned, it was a little bit different. It was the same in terms of what kind of game it was, but it was a little bit different because the second period wasn't that bad. They actually played a pretty decent second. This time, as you mentioned, it was that atrocious third. In my opinion, that was the worst period they played all season. That's not in the heat of the moment. That's not, jumping at a team that deserves criticism. That third period was without a doubt the worst period they played all season. It was a 1-1 game going into the third. You were keeping up with the team that I wouldn't say keeping up because I think Carolina did outplay them those first 2 periods just in general. But as we watched on the podcast, on our watch party, check it out, by the way, if you want, just to see our reactions. We had a watch party on Wednesday for the Flyers and Hurricanes game on the Don't Puck With Media channel. Should be right there if you want to take a watch and just see me freaking out and the rest of us arguing over other complete nonsense and hockey takes as well. But anyway, back on track. That Carolina game, that third period was inexcusable. It was a team that, as I just mentioned, that They were probably outplayed at about a 60-40 pace in those first two periods, but they did enough where they were at least hanging in there. Fedotov was playing a good game. I didn't give him any issues for the way he had played in those first two periods. He was keeping them in it. He had a ridiculous save at the end of the first, going coast to coast on what looked like a wide open net that he just got a piece of to keep it 1-0 after one. But then the third period was like a carbon copy of what they usually have in the second. They just didn't show up. They had a third period where for about 6 minutes, Carolina could do whatever the hell they want. Yep. And they put up 3 goals in that span. And, I'll put one of them on Fedotov that he could have probably had. But other than that, one was Couturier breakdown in front of the net, which was an easy redirect that could have been avoided if Couturier had his man. One was a terrible turnover by Paling that led to a rush the other way. And then I think the third one was kind of a little bit on Fedotov. But again, he was the only reason they were even in that game. So I'm not going to give him any crap for letting him one softy when he's been so much better in recent memory. But that game was rough. Then we went on to Saturday. Yesterday, Flyers took on the Blackhawks. And this game was hyped up for our fan base for the sheer reason. Matvei Michkov versus Connor Bedard. The 2 top high-end prospects of the 2023 draft. Matvei Michkov obviously dropped to 7, but a lot of that was geopolitical issues, wondering if he was ever going to come in after that 3-year wait. Flyers, Danny Briere pretty much ended up being a secret agent, somehow got him over here after 1 because Danny works some magic with the Russians somehow, like he always does. But anyway, back to the point at hand. Flyers, Blackhawks. This was a weird game. They outplayed Chicago, probably in my opinion, at about a 70-30 pace. They were definitely the better team in this game. But Chicago went up 2-0. Chicago got one in the first, with Chicago's fourth line nonetheless.
Yeah.
The Flyers didn't really play that well in their own end at times, and Chicago scored off the rush. And then the second period, there was another lapse that this one I put on Kolosov because he just played the angle so poorly on the big Riggs goal, Pat Maroon. He just did a simple backhand from the far right side of the net, our right, his left. And he played so deep in the net, and it just hit the bottom of his arm and went in. And I'm like, bro, if you play this in a normal positioning, this does not go in. But nonetheless, lapse, Flyers go down 2-0 after 3. But they were playing good. They were getting high-quality bids, but Peter Mrazek was standing on his head. He was a brick wall in there. Absolutely fantastic. Third period comes along. They finally solved it. And Couturier tapped in a pass from Ristolainen to make it 2-1. Not too much longer after that, 2-2. Noah Cates hits a snipe on a slight screen. Power play off of the rush. Overtime hits. Connecting to Michkov. Tapping. Ball game. Flyers win at 3-2. Michkov's second game-winning goal in 10 days. Michkov Mania is fucking running wild. You damn straight he is. He took that step. He looks like the lead horse in the Calder race right now. I mean, Stankoven's playing good. Hudson's playing good. Dustin Wolf, even in Calgary, this guy deserves a little more talk. He's playing good. And I think Celebrini will get it going, but none of them have been on Michkov's level so far. Let me hear your take on Chicago.
Well, the Chicago game, I don't know how to explain this properly, but yes, look, the Flyers outshot them. And they were the better team, but I don't know. There was they dominated, I guess, in a way, but I found it wasn't pretty domination. I don't know if I'm explaining myself properly. It's they controlled the pace, but even just time in the zone or even just trying to cycle the puck, it was off. They were just taking shots on net. It was fine. That's what you have to do, right? But okay, you're better than Chicago, but Chicago was awful. And that's I expect if you want to show that you're that much better than a team, I think it should be clear that you're dominating this team. And for me, it didn't show they were clearly dominating Chicago. It looked almost like a team that's just slightly better than the other. And to be honest with you, look, I think Connor Bedard didn't have a good game at all for Chicago,
He's had a
and like
rough few weeks, actually.
he really has, and like there was a couple, like the only time I noticed Bedard in that game was when he was making mistakes.
He
There was a
made
couple
2 or
like
3 bad turnovers where he was trying to do something more than he should have. He's in his own head right now is what it looks like.
that it has to be that because there was a couple of times he's trying to make like a pass, he passes it behind him, and there's nobody there, or so it's either he's just not communicating properly with the rest of his players, or they're not sure what they're doing together. But hey, look, we ended up winning the game. We should have never been down 2-0. I understand how we were down to the so quick, but then again, like Peter Mrazek, like he said, had a hell of a game. Like where was this Peter Mrazek when we traded for him? Like
In 2018, no kidding.
exactly,
He
it's
was
like,
mediocre at best when we got him.
oh man, like he was pretty decent in Detroit. Then we trade for him. He's hot garbage. He goes off and he goes have some pretty good seasons elsewhere. You're like, man, I don't know. It's like I think the Flyers maybe just be cursed with goalies or something because this doesn't make sense. But whatever. Look, at the end of the day, we got to win. Michkov was the hero in overtime, getting the game winner, which was also a power play goal, which that's pretty good too because our power play has been dreadful of late. So yeah, no, look, can't play it. Look, we got the win, and yeah, and Michkov got the game winner, so all good, man.
That's a check mark for sure. It always is. It's always crazy too. It seems like whenever former Flyers goaltenders step in against us, they play out of their mind. It's not just Mrazek. I've seen it with Anthony Stolarz.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it with him. I've seen it with maybe not Pickard as much. He's been kind of trash, actually pretty damn trash. There was another one that stood out to me that Alex Lyon. When we played against him, he was pretty damn good. So this is a reoccurring thing that just former Flyers goalies seem like they get on their game when they face the Flyers more times than not. But yeah, this was an interesting week. Like, I'm not gonna say I'm happy the way they played, but I'm not mad either. It's a 2-2 week. They left some points on the table. That Colorado game, they could have got to overtime if they could have buried one late. But at the same time, they had such a crap second period that could have been avoided if they just pulled their head out of their ass then. The Carolina game, especially, the third period, they looked rough. But, positives from this week. I got to say, even though I've been critical of him this year, Tyson Forster looks like he's taken a little bit of a step. He got 2 goals this week. He looks like he's playing more keen defensively. He looks more confident out there. Travis Konechny looks like he's on a 90-point pace this year. Like I would said, when this contract was first signed, the one thing I pointed out was this guy better have another level in him because if this is what you're signing him for, $8.75 million to be maybe at most a 70-point guy, that's not cutting it. He needs another level in him, and he has taken that other level this year. And the thing is, TK seems like he has an injury that costs him 2 to 3 weeks almost every year. So I hope he can stay healthy. That's a big thing. But 25 points in the first 21 games, 11 goals and 14 assists. Konechny has been, in my opinion, the Flyers' best forward so far. Probably the only guy who's been better than Michkov. And then obviously, we'll go more in depth with this next week when we have our quarter of the season, review. But I also got to give it Ivan Fedotov. He continues to play strong in net. He's looked like he's felt comfort now. Like it's as we said last week, dating back to that Tampa game, and he just looks like someone who's happy to be here. And one last shout out, Alexei Kolosov. Congratulations on your first win. After all the crap that we went through with the offseason, good shit getting that first win. But yeah, anything else you want to add before we move on?
No, it's pretty much. I think we covered pretty much everything for those games.
All right. So with that being said, I gave some pluses. Let's talk about a minus this year. We went over him 2 weeks ago, and that man is Morgan Frost. So as we were going over the week prior, one of the things I failed to mention was Morgan Frost re-entered the lineup finally on Saturday against the Blackhawks. I think he did also play in that game against the Sabres, but that was more due to injury.
Mm-hmm.
But Frost did re-enter the lineup. Flyers looked good, but there were some talks that came out. Elliot Freeman, on his usual 32 for 32 podcast, came out and mentioned Morgan Frost this week and potential suitors. And one of the teams that he mentioned was the Chicago Blackhawks, who the Flyers just played against yesterday. And, as we mentioned, it looks, prior episodes, it looks like a divorce looks like it's almost inevitable at this point. Frost, he, as you mentioned prior, Eric, he started off the season good in those first 3 games, and then something just went amiss. He just looked rough. He hasn't been what we thought he'd be. He hasn't been that playmaker, consistently a play creator. And that's always been the key issue with Frost, is about quote unquote consistency. He's a guy who can be good in spurts, but then go missing the very next game. And we're like, what the fuck is this dude doing?
Yeah.
Why isn't he helping? Why is the only time we see him when he makes a bad turnover in the neutral zone or makes a dumb pass in the defensive end, leading to a high quality bid? So, Eric, let me let you start this one off. What's your take on Frost? Do they trade him this year? Is this an off-season move that they maybe move his rights elsewhere? Do you think that there's still hope for him? And if he is moved, is Chicago a good fit or maybe someone else?
Well, look, with Morgan Frost, like you said, consistency is his biggest issue. And right now, what I'm seeing from him and like from what we've seen from the past couple of years, I go, for me right now, he's not consistent enough to be a top 6 center. So a first or a second. My hope was always with Morgan Frost that he would become like a really good to decent second line center. Which honestly, he has not shown right now that he's not consistent enough to be that guy. And look, you put him on a pretty good team that he could be like a third line center on a more of an offensive line as an offensive third line center, then like I think he would fit perfect there. But for what the Flyers need right now is he's just not cutting it. And look, does he have trade value right now? Like, I don't think he does. Like, I think at this point, the only thing you're gonna get for him is either like a later pick, like maybe a second or a third if you're lucky, and or else it's gonna have to be like one underachieving player for another underachieving player. Because and personally, like, look, I wouldn't if you're gonna only trade him for let's say for like a 3rd round pick at this point, you might as well just keep him and hope for the best, Because look, we lack centers at the end of the day, and he's a center. So unless you're bringing in somebody else, and then you address it in the offseason. I would like look. The Chicago rumors came out by Freeman, and look, Chicago needs centers too. Like they have Bedard, and then nobody else after that. And there's other teams too. Like look, Nashville needs a center. Minnesota could maybe use another center. Boston could use a center. There's teams that are looking for a center, and I know there's interest in him because there was interest this summer. They didn't want to trade him, understandably so, because we have no centers. So, is he going to stay to finish the season? Honestly, right now, I can't tell you yes or no. It's a coin flip right now. But like I said, if you're going to trade him for a pick, unless it's like a low first or maybe a high second, like I'd just rather keep him on the roster and see what happens. And like I said, like maybe like look, there's a player in a couple players I thought of maybe like if you want to do like a reclamation project, like you have Barrett Hayden in Seattle. Sorry, not Seattle, but in Utah. Him too. Look, he was a high pick. He was 5th overall, and he's so far this season has 8 points in 20 games. And there's also in Chicago, you have Lucas Reichel, who we just saw yesterday.
He scored on us yesterday.
Yeah, he scored on us yesterday, but him too. He was a 17th overall pick, and he has 8 points in 17 games. So I can see if it's a trade like that, I wouldn't mind doing it in season, whatever. But if it's just for a pick, no, I'd rather just keep him, see what happens, because we need to play somebody at center. So
you make some very fair points, Eric. I'm going to kind of add on and maybe even throw some scenarios out there as well. So you mentioned, obviously, the value of Frost. It's no secret it's definitely not that high right now. I think if I'm not getting the minimum of a 2nd round pick, I'm not moving him. Obviously, You spent the first rounder on this guy. I think it was 2017?
I think it was 27th.
It was 2017. He was the second first round pick in that draft. Who would have thought he would have ended up being the better of the two with him and Nolan Patrick? But that's a freak out for
different
the
discussion.
day. But anyway, you spent a first in 2017. He's been here for a while. You got over 40 points from the last 2 years, which is middle six numbers. I wouldn't call it second line. I wouldn't call it third line. I'd call it right in that middle range. But the issue with him, as we've been hammering a dead horse with, consistency. And, I thought of a couple things. Chicago, I would want their second round pick. I don't care. I know they have Oliver Moore coming up. That's a guy that they're probably waiting on, and maybe Frost is a short-term fix that hopefully they can use to fill in the void until a guy like Oliver Moore is ready, and then he can fill the second line center role, and then maybe they move Frost to the 3C if they were to do something like that. But would Chicago want to give up the second round pick for a guy that they feel that is their at best future 3C? I don't know. You mentioned Nashville. That's a good pick as well. They went on an all-in push. They don't really have much of a choice. I mean, after Stammer, do you trust Frost? Is that set 2C there? I mean, you have Philip Forsberg too, so actually probably be the 3C. So again, does Nashville want him as a 3C for a second round pick? I don't know. I would like to move Frost, but I would like to do it as part of a package deal. So I put out a tweet earlier this week where I ranted that they need to get Mitchkov a center. That's pretty apparent. Couturier still is the brains of a good two-way setter, but his body's lacking behind, as we all know. His offensive game is limited at best. He's probably a 3C at this stage, but you're playing him in your top six because you don't have much of a choice. An overpaid 3C at that, but that's besides the point. But you look at the situation here, and it's like, what is the best scenario for him? And for me, is I'd love to package him. And the guy I would have my eye on, packaging him and other pieces, would be a guy like Dylan Cousins out in Buffalo. Dylan Cousins has term on him. He's got a 7-year, $7.1 million contract. When I looked up his stats a couple days ago, these might not be the same, but this was as of a couple days ago. He had 3 goals, 4 assists, and 7 points in 17 games. Now, he may have taken a little bit of a step forward since then. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really followed Buffalo's games. I know they had one game. They won 1-0 against the Kings. I don't know if he scored in that lone game. And they won 3-1, I believe, last night as well. So Buffalo is starting to find their game. I don't know if Buffalo would be willing to do that at this point. But if Buffalo does fade a little bit, that's a team that's looking for winger help. And another guy we have talked about that we're going to talk about a little bit in a little while more is other guys that could potentially be moved. What about a move that you could attach Frost and maybe a guy like Farabee and maybe a late first, early second round pick for a guy like Dylan Cousins? You attach a guy like that, you give them a guy like Farabee, who also looks like he might want a fresh start because there's such a logjam in the Flyers winger core in their top 6. Tippett, Konechny, Mitchkov, and Forster. Farabee's kind of stuck on the third line unless if someone underperforms, then you might bump him up to the second at best. I think Farabee still has top 6 potential, but I unfortunately don't think it's here because of the logjam. And listen, I like Farabee. I've mentioned in the show before. I met with his father before. He's an awesome dude. Farabee is a class act. I hope success here. And if it's not here, wherever he goes, I hope there's success for the guy. Beezer is awesome. So, and it hurts me to say that, Drake, because I want to see him succeed here. But I'm kind of looking at the big picture and the reality of things that Frost might be best moved with a guy like Farabee and a pick for a bigger name like Cousins. Try to get a package deal. Another name that I heard you mention, Minnesota. This one's kind of unlikely, but it's weird how much Marco Rossi's been talked about. And I'll tell you one thing: if you land him, your 1C issue is solved. The next. Now, do you land him? It's very unlikely. I know. I don't see any reason why Minnesota would want to do that. They're contending right now. I don't even know why his name's being brought up consistently, but his name seems to consistently be brought up. Now, Parise and Suter's contracts, where they have almost $15 million dead cap, are gone soon. So I don't see why they wouldn't have money either to give a guy like him an extension or pay a Kaprizov or something like that. But If for some reason he is available, that's a guy I'm all over too, as part of a big package deal. Now, we can talk about trades like this all day. Like, are they realistic? Probably not. Trades like this are few and far between, especially when you're trading a handful of reclamation products and picks, just trying to say, here's some quantity, give us the quality. But that's what I would aim to do if possible. As you mentioned, the reclamation product is probably more realistic.
Yeah.
Another guy that wasn't mentioned that had so much hype a couple of years ago was Shane Wright out in Seattle. And there's been so much issues with the Kraken with him, about him even consistently staying in the lineup and playing up to his capabilities. Like, who is the 1C that they just had extended? I'm blanking on his name in Seattle.
Matty Beniers.
Matty Beniers, that's it. So with Beniers there, I think they're looking at him as their 1C.
Yeah.
So is Shane Wright the future 2C there? I don't know. It has been, it's been a roller coaster of a ride for a guy like him. And I wonder, if you look at him, do you potentially give a call to the Kraken and say, hey, listen, if they're falling out of the playoff picture, maybe you pull a Flyera and a Shane Wright. He's only 20 years old, 21 years old right now. He's a guy that could be looking for a fresh start if this continues. Now, he's a little bit younger than the guys we mentioned. So I think, again, Seattle is more likely than not to say, listen, we spent the 4th overall pick on this guy. We're going to try to make this work out for as long as possible before we give up. But that definitely seems like it's trending in the wrong direction for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Shane Wright is definitely a name I would keep an eye on, because, but like you said, like, I don't know if they're ready to pull the plug now, because I would think they would at least give him till the end of this season and maybe another year before they really make a decision on him. But then again, you also risk the possibility that he loses all his value, because if he doesn't, then so now is maybe the time to trade like a Shane Wright, because he still has some pedigree. But we'll see. And look, the Seattle has a couple decent center prospects coming up too. So if they could, if we could trade them, let's say like a Morgan Frost, like you said, package a Morgan Frost and a Farabee or something like that, which would solve their 2C problems, even though like he hasn't been playing like a 2C, but at least they'll have something. Because look, it's not like Shane Wright's playing like a 2C either right now. So
no, he's not.
But we'll see. But and also, like you mentioned, Marco Rossi. Like what I heard about Marco Rossi in Minnesota. I remember, I think I had heard on a pod like last season. I don't remember who it was, Saravalli, Friedman, one of them. I mean, I heard that basically the Wild they're willing to trade him if they get another center in return who's bigger, because they were looking to because Rossi is 5'9". He's thick, but he's short. So that's what I had heard somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but that's what I had heard. So, but like I can't see them like trading them for like a Morgan Frost or something. But
yeah, again, that would have to be a big package deal. You're moving the middle of a Frost, Farabee, and first round pick, all the Fs, to potentially get a guy like that. But here's the thing with Frost. You're on limited time with this guy, because as you mentioned, Shane Wright, he's got some pedigree. He might start losing his value. You can say the same thing with Frost. He's got back-to-back 40-plus point seasons. He's still a middle six center, in my opinion, but you can only wait on this guy for so long. He's 25 years old. His contract expires after this year. The Flyers they're going to want to make some level of splash for a center this offseason, but they still have some guys to sign. You have Cam York. You have Tyson Forster. If you choose to, Noah Cates and Morgan Frost. And I think they only have about 16, 17 mil, assuming the cap goes up this offseason. If they want to make a move or something like that, now I'm going to assume they make another trade or two as well for some players, which is going to get into in a moment. But if you're going to make a move to get that center that you really want, you may not have a choice but to trade one of these expiring RFAs that are coming up. Now, York and Forrester, I do not expect to move. York's going to get extended. I am almost positive on that. Tyson Forrester, over a 95% chance he's extended. I highly doubt he's moving too. But then you look at a Frost and a Cates. Cates he ain't going to eat that much cap. he's a bottom 6 guy. You're going to probably sign this guy to maybe a little over $1 million, maybe tops. So then you look at a Morgan Frost. He seems like the most reasonable guy to send out, not just for a change of scenery of him, but so you have more flexibility to do more in this offseason. And I look at it, and it's just, is he going to be traded more soon? Is he going to be traded soon? Is he a deadline move? Or do you try to build up his value and maybe move him in the offseason when he's an RFA and just trade his rights? I don't know. But this is going to be something for sure that's going to be interesting. Do you have anything else to add on Frost?
Well, also, I want to mention, I don't know if I mentioned it last pod, but Anthony DeMarco had written an article, I don't know if you read it, on the Daily Faceoff, basically saying that the Flyers are still not ready to give up on Frost.
So I've seen that, yes.
Yeah.
They're ready to – they still want to see if he's part of the future. I have seen that.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, for me, I think he's probably going to finish the season with the Flyers, and they're just going to evaluate him for the rest of the season. But if that's if that's their thinking, they want to really evaluate him, give him the whole year, then look, you can't scratch him anymore. Just let him play. Who cares? At this point, it's not like we're competing. Well, we're trying to compete for a playoff spot, I guess, but we're not trying to compete for a cup. So just let him play and see what he has, because you have, even if you want to trade him, you have to showcase him, right? And you can't showcase him in the press box. So he's got to play. And look, at one point, maybe there's a team that's going to get desperate. Maybe there's a team that, let's say for instance, let's say the Kings, right? Now they have aspirations of making the playoffs and maybe competing. If one of their centers goes down or another team's center goes down, someone might get desperate and give you a first for Frost. Who knows, So, but you can't showcase him if he's in the press box. So just play him for the rest of the season. Whatever he gives you, and then you make a decision. Because look, in the offseason, you want to bridge him again, give him another 1-year extension, fine, go right ahead. But at the end of the day, look, he's, like I said, look, at best, I think he's a third-line center, but that's Kutz's spot now. That's Kutz's spot. And look, we've got Luchenko coming. If we draft another center this year, and if we trade for a center, then there's really going to be no place for Morgan Frost. So I think at that point, you might as well just trade him.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you for sure. But anyway, let's move on to other trade talks. Morgan's not the only name that could be moved in the upcoming weeks. So the first trade target board on the Daily Faceoff came out. And that's one that we saw quite a few Flyers appear on. Two of them being Rasmus Ristolainen and Joel Farabee. So it made me think, all right, who is going to be here to stay? Who's going to be moving? So let's start off with Ristolainen. I think he looks like the most likely guy to move in this trade deadline. 2 years left on his contract, $5.1 million a year. And with the emergence of Emil Adrane, the Flyers are going to need to move some names out, especially with Oliver Bonk potentially coming next year as well. You're going to need to move some of these defensemen in order to make the room for these guys. Sanheim's not going anywhere. York's not going anywhere. They're not giving up on Drysdale yet. Emil Adrane looks like a full-time NHL. You already have Seal locked up. So right there's 5 guys.
Yep.
Eric Johnson, I expect to be gone after this offseason. Zamula's signed for 2 years, so you got him for at least another year. He'll probably be a 7th defenseman unless if you move him. So you kind of look at Risto in this picture, and with Bonk and maybe even Helge Grimes, who looked decent in his 2 games here, who might want to push for a spot, or maybe even a Hunter McDonald. You've got some guys in the minors that are ready to push for a potential bottom pairing spot. A guy like Rasmus Ristolainen, whose value has gone up since you acquired him, for sure, that's a guy you can get a first-round pick for. No question about it. People love big, girthy defensemen who can play the body, play the boards, and now Rasmus Ristolainen has become very good in his own end. He's not the absolute mistake-prone monster he was in Buffalo. No. What Brad Shaw has done to his game and John Tortorella is remarkable. Don't get me wrong. Is he worth the $5.1 million? Probably not. I think he's more of a $4 million a year defenseman. But you could still use a guy like that on the second pair for a good team.
Mhm.
So it makes you look at the big picture. Is a guy like Ristolainen movable? Yes. What are some possibilities? I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs if they could make some room. That's a team that if you're looking for defense help. Um, I look at a team. Maybe if you want to even trade them in division, I think the New York Rangers could use another defenseman.
Mhm.
That's a team that doesn't quite look as toned in their own end as they were last year for sure. Um, and then if another team out there that I think of is the Edmonton Oilers. Like they seem like they're adamant with staying with a Jeff Skinner the rest of the year, but I still think their blue line could use some help. And they're going to need to make some moves this offseason anyway. I wonder if you eat $1.5 million or so, maybe Edmonton doesn't have their first round pick already. We already
Yeah,
have.
you got it.
So maybe you get a first in 2026 for him, or a second, maybe 2 seconds or something like that. I think a guy like Risto could definitely bring in a decent package. What about you?
You know what? I 100% agree. These guys are super valuable, especially like going into the playoffs. You know, everyone jokes, "Oh, playoff Risto, playoff Risto." But
Mhm.
look,
He
look
deserves it.
at what look at what Zadorov did last year, and what happened. Like, he got his contract because of the way he plays, because of the style he plays, the way and look, like, these guys are valuable. Like, and look, like I said, we fix him. He actually is playing really well defensively. And actually, it's funny because when we were watching when I was watching the Buffalo game, the Flyers Buffalo game, I thought to myself, I'm like, who could really use Ristolainen? Buffalo.
Oh, isn't that ironic?
I'm like, you know what? It's like they traded to us, we fix them, and then we send them back. It was just like,
Just give us pick 13 back, please.
yeah, it's crazy because, like, I look at Buffalo's blue and like, look, they're great with Power and Darlene and Byram, but they're very redundant players. They don't have that big, like, Samuelson's supposed to be that big shutdown guy, but
Mhm.
he's struggling this year. And look, Buffalo has cap space, and they lack at that position. So you know what? Maybe they could take on a guy like the line, and we could shut the whole cap
Oh,
because,
for sure.
like we said, also, look, the cap is going up at the very least to 92 million. Plus, there was that rumor out there that it might go all the way up to 97 if they tear up the CBA and redo it this year.
Mhm.
So I think at that point, like, Risto, if it goes that high, Risto would be a $5 million defenseman, and you probably wouldn't even have to retain. And by shedding his salary, if to make the money work, we could probably take on a bad contract, or like an expiring contract that they're not using right now to make, like, the money work. So, but yeah, no, but I could see teams like Vancouver also interested in him. Winnipeg wouldn't shock me. The way they're playing, and
Oh, that's a good pick. Yes.
Winnipeg likes to take players with term, right? If they're gonna trade for something, they're gonna want a guy with term, and maybe even a guy like Farabee to Winnipeg too might actually make a lot of sense. So, but it's like, what do they have to offer us? Like, I don't know. I would have to see because if you do like
Mhm.
a package with Farabee, maybe you're getting a young player in return also, But yeah, they make sense to me. Uh, who else? Let's see. I don't know. Like, maybe Dallas too. Dallas is also a
He would fit
possibility.
well there. I
But
think.
like, I think there's going to be a big market for Risto in at the trade deadline. And like you said, look, we're log jammed right now on defense. There's guys that are waiting for their opportunities, and we just have guys that are blocking them right now. So it will be the best thing.
Oh
So
well.
that's for Risto. And honestly, like, I wouldn't look personally. I wouldn't want to trade Farabee because I've been a Farabee fan for a long
Me
time.
too.
But like, if you could get something of value, like, I wouldn't trade him for picks. I wouldn't trade Farabee for picks. But like, if we're talking about another young player, a center, like him for a center, him in a pick for a center, like something like that would make sense. And honestly, that's what I thought was going to happen in the offseason. Didn't happen. But like, look, also in our bottom six, okay, Paling, Lawton, Noah Case. Three players, redundant.
Hmm.
They all three do the same thing, and they're taking up three spots where they should be taking up either one or two. One of
At
those
most.
three has to go. Like, there's no point in keeping all three of those guys, and that's a problem I think the Flyers have right now. The way the team is built is we have too many redundant players. They have those three guys that are the same. You have guys like Farabee and TK are kind of the same style of player also.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Tippett and Forster, same style of player also. And you're like, we have no centers and we have
We
no
have no
power forward.
playmakers is the biggest issue.
Exactly. So you know what? I think there's a couple guys that definitely could be moved this trade line or this offseason. And they have to, because you can't come back next year with the same this redundancy of players.
They need a guy who's like a playmaker who can play center, win some face-offs, maybe play a little bit of left wing. Oh man, if they only had a guy like that, who am I thinking of? Oh, you know who would fit? That Claude Giroux guy would be pretty good. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I had to make that little joke. No, in all honesty, I would be belated, but that's a discussion for another day. But Joel Farabee, let's talk about him a little bit, as you just mentioned. I love Farabee. Like I said, he's a guy I've wanted to succeed here for a while. BU representative. He's shown flashes. His age 20 season, he looked like he was ready to be the next guy. In fact, if you go back to 2022, Claude Giroux told him he was passing the baton over to Farabee. He told him he's going to be the guy that starts breaking all the records here. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't look like that's going to end up being the case. He's, as you mentioned, him and TK play a very similar style of game. I don't think Farabee could hit the level that TK is, especially not here. Maybe elsewhere, but definitely not here. So I look at it and I'm like, okay, what is the best situation for a guy? He needs to go to a team that is lacking top six wingers. Buffalo, as I mentioned prior, I think would be an excellent landing spot for him. They have a Tage Thompson who seems like he's hurt all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like they need another guy who can play a good high-octane offensive style, who can both facilitate the putt and be a scoring threat. He plays an all-around good 200-foot game, I think, Farabee. He does have things that makes me want to pull my hair out, and he has spells where he disappears, but I put part of that with the fact that he's always buried on the third line. You move a guy like him, I think he's another guy I think you could potentially fetch a first-round pick for. But I don't want to get a pick for him, as you just mentioned. I want to get a young center. I think that definitely is the best way to do it. I want to see what you can get in the market for him. I don't think Farabee is going to be moved this deadline. I think his is less likely, but I do think he would have a market. But I think he's the type of guy the Flyers would want to get an overpay for. Danny... I think ever since that Provorov trade, Danny has looked at the situation and said, there are teams desperate enough to meet the demands that I want. And I think that's how he's looking at Farabee. I don't think Farabee is – I think there will be a market for him. And I think if someone does go over the top, he could be moved for sure. But I think it's more likely than not he is more of an off-season guy. I think Risto is definitely the most likely move. And I think you made a good point on their bottom six. I think one of them definitely has to move. And I think that's another possibility too. I don't think it's going to be Ryan Poehling. They just extended the guy. And he, unlike the other two guys, brings some level of speed. That's the one thing Poehling has that Lott and Cates do not have, is he can transition on the rush well. He's a very good PK guy. And he's a young Lawton in general. So I think he's the one of the three I'd probably like to keep the most. They should have traded Scott Lawton years ago.
Yes.
If I've said this before, I'll say it again. If the rumor is true that they could have got a first-round pick from the St. Louis Blues for him a couple of years ago, that is Danny Briere's worst mistake he's made by far, is not jumping on that at the time. I love Lotz. I get the locker room presence he brings. I get how much of a leader he is. But all good things must come to an end. And Lawton, he's a guy that he just, as you mentioned, feels redundant here. He needs to move. It's time. I think this offseason, or not this offseason, this deadline could finally be the one. I think he has one more year after this year, 2 years in total still. So his contract is unmovable. He's only making $3 million a year. I don't even think you'd have to eat cap to move Lawton. I think someone would take a bottom sixer like him. He could fit on a team's third line. I think Boston would be a good fit for Lott. You want to talk about a guy who could bring leadership on a team that seems like that's having some locker room issues right now. And I never thought I'd say that about the Bruins. That's stunning. But ever since
Yeah.
Bergeron left, it has felt weird there for them, for sure. So I think Scott Lott would fit great with the Bruins' bottom six, a team that could use some bottom six help for sure. And especially with the talks that Trent Frederick could be on the way out there,
Mhm.
maybe he could be the replacement. Um, Another team that I look at that could use a good bottom six like him is maybe a Tampa Bay. You know, the Lightning
Mhm.
are looking to maximize what's left of their window. They just brought in Cam Atkinson. He could probably vouch for lots. I think him and Cam were really close when Cam was here in Philly. So I think the one thing the Lightning lack for sure is some depth that they haven't had in their prior cup runs. So maybe a guy like Lawton could fit there. Noah Cates, if they move him, I'm just looking for a mid-round pick at best, maybe a third or fourth. You're not going to get much for him. He's a
No.
fourth liner, maybe a third at best on a bad team. But he plays a decent 200-foot game, but his
No.
offensive prowess is minimal at best. So if
Yeah.
they move him, if you get me a fourth-round pick, I'm content with that. It's whatever. That's a guy you move just to get a pick as a dart throw and to free up a little more cap maybe in the offseason. But Risto, Watt, and Cates, those are three guys I definitely like to see potentially move. And then that maybe makes some room for a guy like a Denver Barkey next year if he could
Yeah.
potentially push for a spot. He looks like out in London with the Knights, he's been fantastic.
Mhm.
Absolutely fantastic. That's looking like the Flyers' steal of the draft within the last 5 years has been Denver Barkey. I want to see him on this team sooner rather than later. I think that guy has the future of potentially a second liner. Definitely a middle six guy, but possibly a second liner. So, I'd like to see some of these bottom six guys move to
Mhm.
bring in some of the youth that has the opportunity. And as you mentioned, Luchenko should be up next year. He should be a full-time guy. He'll be slotted right in that middle six for sure. I think with Frost's potential inevitable move as well, I'd like to see Luchenko fill in that role as well. Anything else to add before we move on to the week ahead?
Actually, just another guy I wouldn't be opposed to trading and has also been in the rumor mill is Bobby Brink. He's been tied to Minnesota. That's one place that I heard his name come up. And look, not that I don't like Bobby Brink. Look, he's a good player. The My issue with Brink, and look, I have nothing against small players,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, we're not a big team.
Agreed.
And look, if I could get look, you brought up Trent Frederick, right? If Bobby Brink's ceiling is like a 40-point playmaking third liner, well then I'd rather have a 40-point 6'2" forechecker who could like use the body and create space for
Agreed.
other line mates. So if there's a deal for Bobby Brink, I honestly I wouldn't bat an eye. I would do it. Because look, like I said, good player, but like there's nothing Bobby Brink has shown me so far in the 2 years that makes me think that like he could be like a top six
Yeah.
playmaker. So he's a guy I would look to move if just to create space. Because look, Tuamala right now is killing it in the AHL.
Oh, for sure. That's another game we got to get up here.
And look, he had a pretty good season last year until his injury in the second half, and then where he tailed off.
Mm-hmm.
He had a pretty good camp until he got hurt. And look, and now he's killing it in the AHL. So look, Anthony Richard. Look, we had to send him back down because of the logjam of forwards. So
Mm-hmm.
we have guys that could basically do what our bottom sixers are doing. So if we could like you said, if we could package some of these guys to bring in a center or it's just something that could fill a different need on our team and to alleviate all this redundancy, like I've said, like that would be ideal for me.
It's funny you mentioned Brink too. I was that's a guy I kind of talked about more last offseason. That would be a good trade candidate. I do think that there is definitely a good opportunity to move him. He looks one thing that I want to say about him that has stood out a little bit this year so far is I feel like he's played with a little more burst. He
Mhm.
plays a lot quicker of a game than he did last year. I think he has improved. I do agree with you. I don't think he's going to be much of a top sixer. I think he's realistically what you mentioned, a third line playmaking winger who could potentially put up 40 points in his prime, maybe 45 in a good year. But, we got a lot of that already. And I like Brink. I think that's another guy that I I think he might be a guy that could be more likely to be moved next season's trade
Mhm.
deadline as to this one. But if the right deal were to come for him, I'd move him in a heartbeat. Sure. Like you need, as you mentioned, a guy like Trent Frederick would fit here without a doubt. A big 6'2", big body forward checker who can keep the puck in the offensive zone. And Frederick's not shy to scoring. He's had, I think, a 20-goal year under his belt, if I remember, or something close to it. Like he's one of the best depth forwards, I think, in the NHL. He's a guy that I think he's going to have a really good market if the Bruins decide to move him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Brink, I definitely think I would move him if the right deal came. But if I were to guess, I think he's more of a 2025, 26 deadline guy, more opposed to this one, because I don't think they're going to move that many people right away. But again, if the right deal came, I'm doing it for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
But anyway, let's move on. Week ahead, Flyers got another, I think, 4 games this week. Mm-hmm. Starting off, they wrap up their 5-game homestand on Monday against the Vegas Golden Knights. Then on Wednesday, part of the second craziest day of the year behind the Frozen Frenzy Day, which is the day before Thanksgiving. They're at Nashville. Me and my girlfriend were actually talking about going to that game at the beginning of the year, but when we saw that it was next to Thanksgiving, I was like, that's kind of out of the question. But anyway, and then the usual Black Friday 1 o'clock game. That's always awesome. And I'm unfortunately not going to be able to watch that game because I have work. But 1 o'clock game at home against the Rangers seems like a tradition at this point. And then they end the week on Saturday evening at St. Louis, home of new head coach Jim Montgomery. Congratulations to him and his new job. Eric, let me let you give the prediction for the week.
Okay. If I have to be perfectly honest, I don't see us having a pretty good week. Look, sorry, Vegas is another top team. Like mm-hmm. We're gonna play like the Avs and like Carolina. So I really can't see. I can't call a win there. We're just not at that level yet. Mm-hmm. And look, Nashville's struggling this year. They're really not playing well. So I think that should be a pretty competitive game. Mm-hmm. And like we had mentioned, with maybe they're a team that's looking for centers. So if maybe Frost can show a little something that game, maybe they could talk and see what happens. Maybe Frost leaves with them that evening. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Rangers too. Another Rangers top 10. Another top team. Again, I don't think we have the team to compete with them. And the Blues, maybe they're gonna get that, like you said, that new coach bump, and so I could see best case scenario, obviously a 2-2 week. Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't shock me if maybe one of those Blues or Nashville games that they cough it up and end up like 1-3 or 1-2-1, but I can't say that I'm very optimistic about this week.
I hear where you're coming from. So I look at each game. Flyers have actually played historically well against Vegas, if you look back to it. They never seem like they get smoked by them. They always keep up with them. They beat them at home last year, I remember. And then the game that they lost in Vegas was in the final weaning seconds of regulation. I actually think they win that game. I think they shock a lot of people and win that game. Flyers probably want to end their homestand strong. I think they shock people, win that game 4-3. I'm going to say they beat Nashville as well. I'm going to say 3-1. I think they get mollywopped by the Rangers. I feel like they always lose that game against the Rangers on Black Friday. I think they played the Bruins before on it too, but it seems like it's always against the Rangers. I think they lose that game like 6-1. I think that's just an ugly one. The Rangers just have the Flyers number in recent year. Yeah. I'm going to say the Rangers won that one big. And then the last game, I think, against the Blues, you mentioned that little burst from Montgomery. I think they lose that one in overtime 3-2. So I'm going to say a 2-1 week. I think they shock us and beat Vegas just because of the historic play they've had against them. It just seems like they always play them competitive. And I don't know why. They just do. And then, like I said, I think they beat Nashville, get henny-dicked by the Rangers, and then end it with an OTL against the Blues. All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up, bud?
Final thought. I would say I'm going to be looking at the power play this week because, like I mentioned before, like it's really been struggling of late. Like it was really hot to start the season, and then it just nosedived since then. Like we got the power play goal, yeah, like the OT winner last night, yesterday afternoon. So maybe it turns a corner. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, no, that's what I'm really gonna be looking for, and just efforts. Hopefully, like to compete, see what we could do. And there's something I wanted to bring up just quickly, fast. Is Rocky Thompson? Sorry, just quickly, and I think he's on the hot seat. I really honestly think Rocky Thompson is on the hot seat. Like, look, we can't have this many offensive players regress in the same season. And like I said, the power play started off hot, but was that just a Michkov bump? And then all of a sudden, then teams start to adjust, and it's back. It looks just as disorganized as it was the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Rocky Thompson hot seat.
I agree with that. I think Rocky Thompson should have been launched into the sun 2 years ago. Never mind this year. Never mind last year. When you have the dead last power play 3 straight years,
Yeah.
the fact that you still have a job, you must have some level of blackmail on the organization. But anyway, you kind of actually stole my thunder a little bit. I was going to say I need to see more from the guys who've been struggling. Owen Tippett, Tyson Forster took a little bit of step, but now has kind of been weaned off the last 2 games. But Owen Tippett needs to turn it up. I need to see him finally turn the needle. Like 4 goals at this point is inexcusable. He should be at about 8 or 9 right now. Like you got paid this offseason. You got an 8-year deal. You're making over $6 million a year. There is no reason right now you should be on about an 18 goal pace at best, 17, 18 goal pace. That's inexcusable. You're a 30 goal scorer every year at minimum, or something close to that. I know he's never officially got it, but when you hit your prime, this guy should be a 30 goal scorer every year. So he needs to turn it up. Number 2, I need to see Joel Farabee turn it up. I need to, he was hot out of the gate a little bit in that West Coast trip, but like the power play as well, he kind of weaned off. I need to see him turn it up. And then obviously, as we beated this drum all episode, Morgan Frost. Like you want to show something, you want to be here for the future. Even though I think this door is already slammed shut, but if you want to try to bust it down again, you've got a couple months to show it, if that. It's time. It's now or never. You're 25. There's no more chances. I think the door is already shut, but if you want to find a spot here for the future, next game, I need to see it consistently. But yeah, that'll do it for this week. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Another great episode of Flyera Gonna Flyera. Unfortunately, as I mentioned prior, Jamey had some technical issues. I think he'll be back with us next week. Hopefully that'll be resolved by then. But yeah, good week. 2-2. Actually, I should say good week, but okay week. 2-2. Yeah. But let's see how things go from here. Another big 4 games next week. Also, happy Thanksgiving for all who celebrate, and we will see you next week. Another installment of Flyera Gonna Flyer. This was episode 20. We'll see you for episode 21 next week. Take care, everyone. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and finally, let's go Flyers.